The second thing is the fact that the enormous quantities of highly radioactive water have been found in trenches. These trenches are outside the nuclear containment. That means the containment isn't containing. I posted a link that's on our site as well that talks about how radioactive material can get out of the nuclear reactor and get through the containment and out into these trenches without a breach of the containment and without a breach of the nuclear reactor. It involves leakage of a seal at the bottom of these nuclear reactors, and it's quite plausible. And I urge you to take a look at it in detail. Well, what does this mean? The amount of water in those trenches is enormous, and it's very difficult to get the mineralizers to remove that radioactivity in such high quantities. Basically, if the mineralizer absorbed that radioactivity, it would become so radioactively hot that personnel couldn't go near it. I've also had people say, well, why don't you take that water and pump it back in the nuclear reactor? Well, the radioactivity in that water is over 100 rem per hour. And basically that means that anybody who stands near it for 3 or 4 hours receives a lethal dose of radiation. So if you were to pump it back into the reactor, the pumps would become so radioactive that personnel couldn't operate the pumps. There's not much tankage space available on the site. They're trying to pump that water into the unit condensers. The condensers are not seismic and may not have withstood the earthquake and tsunami. So I think that water is leaking into the ocean. The quantity of radioactivity that's been detected in the ocean is an indication of an enormously large source of water, of radioactive water, hitting the ocean. I don't think it came from air releases. I think somewhere there is a leak into the ocean from this material. It's a troubling, really troubling scenario because the containment isn't containing. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that core damage appears to be minimized by Tokyo Electric. I had staff working for me when I was the vice president on 3 Mile Island during the recovery, and I got to view the videos of the core damage at 3 Mile Island. Now we're putting one slide up here. It's very poor grain, but this is 1980s technology through a mini submarine. But you can see those thimbles are the nuclear fuel rods that have been totally destroyed. Now, at 3 Mile Island, the reactor only was without water for about 10 hours, maybe 12. So for half a day it didn't have water cooling it. And also, it only ran for 3 months before the accident, which means there's very little decay heat. At Fukushima, on the other hand, that reactor ran for 4 years, so the fuel had an enormous amount of decay heat in it. And the other piece is that it was uncooled for many days. So more decay heat plus very little cooling tells me that the damage inside that core is enormous. TMI lost 1/3 of its core. It wouldn't surprise me if there's 70 or 80% of the core that's been damaged. Now what that means is it falls to the bottom of the reactor as slag, radioactive slag, molten slag at the bottom of the reactor. At very least, it's damaging those seals that I talk about. At worst, it's gradually eating its way through the nuclear reactor, and a meltdown is possible. Combine this with the salt water they've been added, you have hot water, incredible source of heat and salt, corrosion of the vessel's likely. The net effect here is that I believe that the quantities of radiation that are going to continue to leak from that reactor into the containment and now apparently out of the containment are large, and frankly I don't see how they're going to be stopped in the short term. Well, sorry, it's kind of a gloomy picture today. I will get back to you when I have more to tell you. Thank you.
Imagine working at the crippled Fukushima dike.
Well, that was Arnie Gundersen from his great website talking about what Arnie Gundersen knows very well because he was at the cleanup of the 3 Mile accident on the east coast of the United States. What's amazing is here we are, September of 2011, okay, 6 months later, and the Fukushima reactors, at least 3 of them, are still completely uncontrolled. Radioactive water spilling out everywhere into the air, and there's no control. Their solution in Japan, believe it or not, I won't play it because it's in Japanese, but their Japanese minister goes out to the Fukushima prefecture, is what they call their county, and tells the people, if you have faith and you're strong, you can eat radioactive food and it won't harm you. Right. I have a suggestion for that Japanese minister. Go to ground zero or close to the Fukushima nuclear plant and eat exclusively vegetables that are highly radioactive with 50 rem or more, and then come back to us if you're alive in 3 months and tell us how strong you were. I don't think he'll take my suggestion, even if I said it in Japanese. What's incredible here is a lot of us sort of look down our noses at the Russians when they had the Chernobyl disaster. But the Russians were within a very few months able to cap that whole thing in concrete, even dig underneath the plant so it wouldn't leak down into the water table, and put some kind of containment on it. Now, it wasn't perfect, and the concrete cracked in many places, and they had to reseal it. The Japanese are supposedly a democratic nation. They've got the help of the United States and all the other Western nations, and they still have radioactive. And what's really interesting is you have to go on YouTube if you want to get Geiger counter readouts across Canada and North America. Your mainstream media, ABC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, none of them are reporting Geiger counter readings slowly escalating across North America and Europe, even as low as northern Mexico. Radioactive water off the coast of Japan is now being diluted as it swirls around the North Pacific. And there's no monitoring being reported to you and I. Really? Really? The information is out there. You have to go to certain weather websites, and you have to be very, very vigilant, because as soon as there's a report of something that's very dangerous, highly radioactive, they have somebody, even though the data is automatically put out to the weather website, somebody deletes it within 5 or 10 minutes instead of leaving it on there for weeks for everybody to go back and look at the archived weather automatic reports.